And if you're anything like me, it's kind of like, whoa, I can't believe it's here already, but it is. And we're going to go on a flow. I'm looking forward to sharing with you here for just a little bit of time. And let's just pray. Can we do that? Let's just ask the Lord to just speak to our hearts and spirits here this morning. So, Heavenly Father, I come before you, thankful for this morning. We're thankful for this Christmas season. Thankful for the things you want to continue to do in our hearts and our lives. I pray, Lord, that as we share and talk, that it be your words and your anointing. In Jesus' great name we pray. And, I love the kids' musical. Of course, they're cute and they're fun, and watching them all do their things. And it's fun even just watching my two boys up there. You can see the way God perfectly creates every kid, right? One's wild, one's shy. It's just it's wonderful creation the way God does things. And I love seeing that. But the point of what the kids is talking about is that Jesus is the real reason of the season. And we've heard this so many times. But if you just stop and if you pause and you reflect for just a minute, and the food and the festivities, the gift exchange, those are all wonderful things, right, in and of themselves. They're good things. But if that's what it's all about, don't you believe that we've missed something much bigger in life? And it even begins to be a little self-serving. And as believers and Christians, we see the larger purpose of what God wants to do, not only through this season, but what He wants to do in our hearts and in our lives. And so, I guess what I want to tell you here is if you're a follower of Christ, I really want you to set this time aside and let the Lord do something spectacular in your life through this month. If you're maybe new to the things of God, maybe you got invited here to see a family member or see their kids, and maybe faith is something new to you, I want to just ask you to be open to the things of the Lord in your life and say, hey, I'm here today, and I'm just going to ask you that you would just be open to allowing maybe some things you've heard in your life, of faith to speak into your heart, because I promise you, the things of faith, the things of Christ, they're good things. They're wonderful things. And so this morning what I want to do is I want to share a message simply called Jesus, Light, and Life. It's going to be a little bit more of a devotion here this morning. And it's going to kind of also kick off a little bit more of what I want to talk about really throughout this month and kind of lead us into where we're going, because Jesus is the light of the world. Amen? And that's what we have to keep our focus on here this morning. And if you've been doing your Christmas decorating, and if you're anything like my house, maybe you have Christmas. How many of you guys put on the Christmas music as you're decorating your house? Some of you do this. My wife does this. She loves her Christmas music. I want to be honest, in my house, it's already been on for like 2 months straight. And you can call me Scrooge, you can call me whatever. I'm not the biggest Christmas music fan. You just be like, how can you say? I just say if it wasn't Christmas music, if that was just regular music, you would never listen to it. If you took the words away from it, and me and Susie, we get those things, if you just took the themes of it away and you put any other words to it, you never really would listen to any of that. Let's just, let's do it like this. Get him off the stage. He is speaking heresy. This is Christmas music. This is wonderful. But you probably have heard by this time, right? It's the most wonderful time of the year. How many times? 100,000 times already. You probably have gotten this across. But it never mentions Jesus. One time. And that whole thought of it's the most wonderful time of the year. So sometimes we think it's the most wonderful time of the year, and we miss the main thought of what this whole thing is really all about. And we think it's the most wonderful time of the year, but I want to be really real with us, because sociologists, doctors, they've done a little bit of research on this, and the truth is that the holidays tend to be a bit of a magnifier of the complications and the reality that brings some difficulty into people's lives during this time. And so for many people, the holidays are not the most wonderful time of the year, but for many people, did you know this? They're actually some of the most difficult times of the year. And maybe you're in this place, and maybe that might be a little bit of where you're going. Maybe it's a hodgepodge of it. Maybe it's some of the most wonderful times, but maybe it's some of the most difficult times. Maybe this is the first Christmas without somebody that you've lost, or maybe it's the remembering. I know Susie just last night, she was doing one of our 13 or 14 Christmas trees we have in our house right now. We have a lot. And she has one that we call our EE Christmas tree because that's from her grandmother. EE's wonderful. We lost EE a few years ago. And she hand-stitched all these snowflakes. And so every time she puts these up, it's a remembrance of her grandmother, Eve. So it was a wonderful lady. And so, sometimes it's the most wonderful time of the year, but sometimes it's difficult because we think of the people that we spent this time with. You with me? And so we understand these things. They used to be, maybe for some of the families, it's they've gone through a divorce or separation. So it's this complicated of where are we going? How is this going to work? Where are the kids? And all these things. And just family units and family things are just begin to even bring in a little bit of tension into people's homes. And so the wonderful time, yes, it's wonderful, but sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes in some homes it's just complicated. That's probably a little bit better way to describe our house. We have family in New Jersey. We have family in Virginia. We have family in Maryland. Everyone's probably similar, right? The family's just kind of all over the place. You're trying to figure it all out. This year we're going to be home for Christmas, which is like brand new for us. We usually go down to Virginia. And Susie's not in this room, so she'll be in the next service, so I can say this story to you. Unless she walks in, I'm going to change what I say there. And she says, John, I think... So anyway, no. She said, I think we should stay home this Christmas. Now, I have to turn into a professional actor at this moment because, of course, I have to act like I really wanted to go to Virginia. But what I really want to do is stay home, take my vacation time. Well, babe, I'm not sure. Should we really do this? Did you really bring this up? So anyway, it's this complicated time of do we stay, do we go? Her parents were up last week. We actually did Christmas over Thanksgiving with her family. We're mainly, you understand, this is kind of the holiday season that we're in right now. It's wonderful. Sometimes it's difficult. For most of us, it's become a little complicated, right? And it has all these emotions. It's all about Christmas lists. Have you got so-and-so's? How many guys are still trying to chase somebody down for their Christmas list? Let me see right now. Come on. I need a Christmas list, right? Give me the Christmas list. And somebody is like, this is the big thing in my family, spending limits, right? Seems like everybody in every family has different spending limits. So for this family, we do this. For this, we do this. Some families have gotten away from it. We draw names, right? We draw names for this family, and then you want to make sure, well, who's drawing names? Because I really don't want that family member, because we all know they don't know how to buy presents. So I really hope that they aren't the ones drawing my name this year, because I know how to pick presents, right? But it just gets complicated, the holidays, and so it creates some tension in our life, and for some of us, it's what's happening around us. And as you look at this, I think it begins to kind of excel some things that are really going on in our life the rest of the season, but they come kind of magnify during the season. They kind of magnify problems that we can't solve, people that we can't control, and expectations that we can't meet, right? And these are things that we deal with all year around, but the reality is that during this time of the year, they kind of just jump up on us a little bit more. And then if we kind of think a little bit more towards it, sometimes we realize during the holiday season that I'm sometimes the problem that I can't seem to solve, and I look at it a little bit deeper, and I'm the person sometimes that can't control, just out of whack in some areas of my life, and I'm the one setting expectations that other people can't meet over my life. And the holidays just begin to bring forth these things. And so, let's face it, Christmas sometimes is not the most wonderful time of the year because of what's happening around us. But this is the point of this morning's talk is Christmas is absolutely the most wonderful time of the year because of what has happened. You with me? So moving forward with this Christmas experience, I want us to move a little bit closer to wonderful and a little bit further away from the difficulty and the complications. And this is the first thing I want you to just jot down here this morning. I'm going to give you 3 quick things. This Christmas is not just about what is happening. It's about what happened. You with me? Don't miss this over this Christmas season. Christmas is not just about what's happening. Because if you're anything like me, my calendar is about ready to go into like super overdrive right now. And I love it. I really do. I'm a people person. I love being around people. We love getting together. We love doing this stuff. So, it's going to go into a little bit faster pace. We love this. But Christmas, whether it's the most wonderful time, the most difficult, the most stressful, the most complicated, whatever it is, Christmas is not about what's happening. Christmas is about what has happened. It's about Jesus. It's about what's happened. We're here to celebrate the single most wonderful event in human history. An event that changed everything forever. An event where God sent His Son into a world to become the center of human history. An event that God sent His Son into the world not just for the sake of changing history's sake, but to become the center of your life and my life. And I promise you, when Jesus begins to be the center of your life, and when it begins to be the center of everything we do, we are allowed to now build our life on a firm foundation that's stable, that's hopeful, that now is a life with sense of purpose. And so when life gets sometimes difficult and complicated, and we walk through those things, we realize that there's a greater purpose to our life because there's a stability about something that happened that makes a difference in our life today. You with me? Yes. And so this is what I want you to remember from this morning. Whatever you have going on and whatever this month has in store for you, please remember this, that it's not so much about who's around us through this holiday season. It's much more of who is for us through this holiday season. The Apostle Paul says it like this in Romans 8:31. If God is for us, then who can be against us? If God's for us, then who can be against us? And if your family is going great, that's wonderful. But still remember, God is the one that this thing is all about. And so our focus is the light of the world. And God's here to make an incredible difference in the way we live our life. That's what the Bible is about. That's what the narrative of Christ is really all about, is to give us purpose in our life, to live with hope and purpose and stability. And so what I want to do is I want to just kind of focus in on one of the Bible stories for the last couple of minutes here. And if you love reading the gospel stories, there's 4 gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they're outlined. And they're pretty amazing. And if you look through Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we call them the synoptic gospels. They're very, very similar. Matter of fact, you can even buy synoptic gospels where they have them right next to each other. And many of the stories parallel each other there. Many of the stories are in the same gospel. They write similar stories, and they change a little bit because of this. Because remember, they're different authors, and their intended audiences are different. So they're trying to reach different people with their gospels, but they're similar. But the story of John is unlike the other gospels. And that's kind of the gospel that I'm really hoping over this month that I really want to kind of focus my attention on during this Christmas season. But it's very unlike the others for this one reason. John, in the beginning of his gospel, he really puts no intended purpose on the narrative of the birth of Jesus. There's no real story. The other gospels kind of come in and they tell the story of the birth of Jesus. John chooses not to. And for me, it's a little bit surprising because if there's any gospel that probably should have told the story of the birth of Jesus and probably done it the best would probably be the Gospel of John. If you remember when Jesus died, he took John and he took Mary, his mother, and he said, Mary, you are now John's mother, and John, you are now Mary's child. You guys are to take care of one another. And we know that John took care of Mary, and they went and they supported one another, and they walked with one another, and they were there. And so could you imagine how many times if you were John, you must act as, and Mary, can you just tell me this whole story one more time? So the angel appeared to you, And what did you think when you found out you were going to become pregnant by the Holy Spirit? You must have been saying, can you imagine how many questions John must have had through their life together about this story? And he must have heard it time and again. But John remained silent on the birth narrative. And so I think what we have to do is we have to look at the gospel and pull ourselves out of the narrative a little bit and understand the greater capacity of what's taking place. So understand, all the gospels were written at different times. The Gospel of John was written as John was very old in life. He was probably in his 90s. He was a captive. He was a prisoner on the island of Patmos. And the truth is he probably was counting down the days of his life, realizing that he's probably at the end of his life. And I think he said, I have to get out a few things here that matter. He's heard all the stories. If there's a person in all the Bible, he's heard every story. He's heard every narrative. He's been a part of every part of the biblical history of the life of Jesus. And that's why when people come and give their life to the Lord, they say, where should we start? We say you should start with the Gospel of John. If you can get that down, a lot of this is going to make sense to you. And so I think John, he'd heard these stories many times. He'd probably been quizzed on them over and over and over many times before in the history of the church. And so John had this incredible ability to kind of summarize Jesus into these powerful statements. You with me? And one of the ways that he did this is he was able to come and grasp the infinite power of Jesus Christ in summary thoughts. And one of the most powerful things is this, is in 1 John, this is one of the epistles, 1 John 3:16, not John 3:16, 1 John 3:16, this is what he says. So we have come to know and to believe that the love that God has for us, God is love. And whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. Do I have that verse up there, guys? 1 John 3:16. Maybe it got messed up in the notes. There you go. John stops. He says, this is what I know about God. God is love. Let me summarize all these things. I've heard every story you can imagine. I've lived it all. I've watched it all. I've taken care of Jesus' mother. And God is love. Paul tried to define this same statement like this in Romans 5:8. But God demonstrated his own love for us like this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. This is how God shows his love. That while we were still sinners, Jesus gave his own life for you and I. And this is the second thing I want you to write down this morning. Christmas is about understanding God's primary mission was to send his love. His love to you and I. Long before Hallmark came up with this, when you care enough to send the very best, God had already taken care of that slogan. God cared enough to send his very best. He sent his own Son, Jesus Christ. And John gets it. And can you imagine the life that John must have lived and seen? Later in his life, as he writes this gospel, he would have seen the persecution of the church. He would have seen all the Jewish officials been persecuted, and the spread of this, the Roman Empire, begin to destroy all of the known Jews. He would have witnessed tens of thousands of his Jewish brothers and sisters killed or taken as prisoners and enslaved across the Roman Empire. He would have lived through the martyrs of his brother James, of his friends Peter and Paul, and the rest of the disciples. He would have heard stories and saw them being killed for their faith in Christ. He would have witnessed the marching on to Jerusalem by the Romans and the destruction of Jerusalem and the burning of the Holy Temple. All this stuff would have been done and finished by the time John is writing his gospel. Perhaps even at this time, his own imprisonment. By this time, the Romans had already tried to kill John by putting him into boiling oil, and he survived. And so they said, we can't kill this guy, let's just put him as a prisoner on this island. And so this is where he's writing this. And yet through this chaos and loss, John never loses his faith, and he's able to tell this story of this person of Jesus in such a powerful way. And at the end of his gospel, this is what he says, John 20, verse 30. I want you to catch this because this is the narrative of why he chooses not to go so much into the birth story. It says this, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. He said, listen, Jesus did so many things that I can't even begin to put them into this book. Okay? There's so much. I have lived through it all. So many miracles, so many stories. I've been telling these stories for 90 years. I couldn't even begin to put them into this book. That's all I can say. That they're not recorded. And then verse 31, he says this, but these things, the things I have chosen to written, are for this reason, that you may, what? Believe. That you may believe. I'm not here to impress you with information. Okay? This isn't a historical narrative. I'm not writing this gospel to just tell you a historical story about a person who lived a certain day and hours in life. It's not the purpose of this gospel. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is what? The Messiah. He is the Son of God. He's not just some historical figure, but he is the Messiah. He is the Son of God. And by that, by believing, you can take this gospel, and by believing, you will have life. And not just any ordinary life, because you already have regular life. You already are breathing. You have bios life. You already have the kind of life that's limited here on earth. But this life is destined for death. It'll have a time date. We all check out of this life at some point. But he's talking about a different type of life. He's talking about a Zoe life, a God life, an abundant life, a nature, eternal, destiny. And this is what he's talking about, that you may have life. And the only way you can have this kind of life is in his name. Is in his Son. It's the only way it happens. And so John is saying, I believe that Jesus is not only love, but he is the very source of eternal and supernatural life. So this is the purpose of the gospel. Are you with me? So let's look back to the beginning of John's gospel. And this is where he starts, right? And so yet, when John starts the gospel, he chooses not to